Welcome to GAEL Unscripted, where leadership meets learning and real conversations drive real impact. I'm Ben Wiggins, Executive Director of GAEL. Join us as we go beyond the headlines with Georgia's top education leaders. Let's elevate the conversation. Welcome, GAEL members. We're here for actually our first guest on the GAEL Unscripted podcast. Today we have two special guest superintendents. We've got Robbie Hooker from Clark County Schools, and we've got Philip Brown from Jackson County Schools. So I'm just going to give them a minute or two to just introduce themselves, maybe tell us about their family real quick, and then we'll dive right into this. Robbie, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. My name is Robbie Hooker. I'm concluding my 36 years in education. Been married, going on 30 years, July 15th, to Karen Hooker, my beautiful wife, and I have two kids, a daughter who is getting married this summer and is a third-year teacher, and my son who just finished college at Georgia Southern and will be starting at UGA in the fall in mass communication and journalism. So
that's awesome. Congratulations. Wedding. When is that wedding?
July 11th.
Wow. You got some plans to make, don't you?
I got some bills.
And some checks to write.
Woo. I'm just thinking about the 36 years and wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm Philip Brown. I'm the school superintendent in Jackson County. I am just finished my third year there as superintendent. This is my 22nd year in public education. And I'm married to Catherine Brown, who's currently the principal at Collin Ferry Elementary School in Oconee County. She's at the end of this year moving to Barrow County as their chief academic officer. Excited for her and her career and all the amazing things that she does. We have 4 children. Landon's 14, Owen's 12. I hope I get these right. Lincoln's 10, and Annabelle's 3. So a 3-year-old at the house and a baby girl. So we have lots of fun in our house, and it's just every day's an adventure.
That's right. You want to share the story when I foretold the birth of your 4th child without
I mean,
anyone even knowing it?
Walking into a restaurant one day, and Mr. Wiggins decided he would say that I forget exactly how it went. You sent a text and said y'all should have a 4th.
I said the 4th one will definitely be a girl.
You did say that. The 4th one will definitely be a girl. So I walked in and shared the news with him that there was a 4th one on the way. Did we know at that time that it was going to be a girl?
I think no. You had just found out she was pregnant. I knew.
You had that inclination.
I just had a feeling. All right. Well, Robbie, why don't you start off and just tell us, why did you choose to get into public education? Was there a reason? Was there someone that influenced you? Just why did you decide to get into public education?
You know, I went to college and got a psychology degree, and my goal was to get a master's degree and become a psychologist and help people with their problems. God has a way of changing your direction. I spent a summer in Waycross at Georgia Alliance Camp for the Blind. Went back and got a master's in special education and went from there. I went to Valdosta State and had a great experience. My first year of teaching, believe it or not, was kindergarten. I taught kindergarten my first year of teaching.
Did not know that.
Yes, I did. And had a great experience and had an opportunity to teach at all grade levels. I did 3 years of elementary school, 3 years of high school, and 2 years of middle school.
That is fantastic. I had no idea about the elementary, the kindergarten. That's serious street credit right there.
We should do some research on your kindergartners, where they are now.
Where are they now? That would be a great way to do a podcast.
Those kids are probably 45.
Wow.
Or older. I don't know where any of them are.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
All right, Philip, how about you?
It was an interesting path. Neither one of my parents were educators, and neither one of them were really college graduates. And so for me, it was the opportunity to go to Valdosta State and sat in a business class and did a presentation, and the professor at the end of it kind of said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being a teacher?" I don't know if he didn't think I was cut out for business, or he thought, this guy connects well with people, and that might be a good career for him. So I went to Valdosta State. Robbie and I are both Blazers, and got a degree in middle school education, and then started my teaching career in Camden County. Taught for a year there, and then moved over to Eccles County down in South Georgia.
Yes.
Good. I love that place. Great people. And then Catherine and I decided we were going to come to Georgia, come to Athens and get our PhDs. And so there was an opportunity at Oconee County for me, and then she went over to Barrow and was a teacher there. So middle school math and science.
That's fantastic. We're all three from South Georgia.
Yeah.
We've got Thomas County right here, the big town of Boston.
Boston, Georgia, that's right.
That's right. They have a big marathon every year, right?
Mini marathon. Half marathon.
Awesome. I still call it Central of Thomasville.
Yeah.
That's still what I call it to this day. And then Philip went to that school that was our nemesis growing up forever, Valdosta High School. I'm from Moultrie, and we didn't like Valdosta people very much because they beat us all of the time. Well, both of you, you got into education and teaching, and then at some point you decided to become an administrator. And talk to us about that process. Like, why did you become an administrator? Most of us, when we get into teaching, we don't think about it. That's not our plan. Things just kind of happen. But Philip, why don't you start off and tell us how you got into administration as a principal?
So I've been teaching for 5 years and just started thinking about the opportunity to, create a larger sphere of influence. And so I interviewed for a middle school assistant principal job at Oconee Middle. I was fortunate enough to be hired there. And Zernona Thomas, who retired a few years ago as the superintendent of Clark County, was our principal. And, she and I had a meeting, just her and I, and she says, I'll be here 5 years, and hopefully I'll get you trained up well enough that you'll have an opportunity to interview and get this job when I leave in 5 years. 6 months later, she got hired in Clark County and left. And so I interviewed for the job at Oconee Middle and was fortunate enough to be chosen. Looking back, I'm 28 years old, knowing what I know now, I don't know if I would have been a superintendent who was bold enough to make that decision, to make that hire. And just very thankful Dr. John Jackson gave me the opportunity. And so I think that the one thing that I learned in all that process, I had a mentor who I went to see during that process and going through the interviews, and I consulted with him, and I said, what do you think? And I just want your honest opinion. Am I ready? Can I handle it? Am I going to fail? And he said, I think you'll be great. And I took that as this confidence that this gentleman who'd been doing it for a long time had in me. And as I was walking out the door, he said, hey, do you want to know why I think you'll be great at it? And I said, yeah, that's probably good to know. And then he told me, he said, well, I think you'll be great because you have no idea what you're doing. And there's veteran teachers there, and you will listen to them, and you'll take their advice, and they'll help guide you. And you'll learn a lot, and you'll fail, and you'll make some mistakes, but you'll learn from those mistakes. And so that was a humbling comment, because it just reminded me that in these jobs in educational leadership, you fail often, and that's how you pick yourself up and try to make the best decision you can possibly make for the kids in those buildings.
That's outstanding. Okay, Robbie, why don't you share with us how you got into the role of principal and made that move from teaching into administration?
Well, I had the fortunate, I was very fortunate that when I worked here in Clark County, Dr. Maxine Neeson was my principal, and she was a great influencer. I got an opportunity to work as an assistant principal. They were opening a new middle school in Barrow County, Westside Middle School, Jairus Hayes and Dr. Sheila Cars. I got to work with Jairus Hayes for 1 year, I think 1 or 2 years, and then he went and opened Appalachia. So I served as an assistant principal for 6 years, and I got to spend a lot of time with Sheila Cars, who really pushed about, if you're going to be an effective administrator, you better know instruction. She says the majority of my job was discipline, but she says anybody can do discipline. She says, but you need to know instruction if you're going to be effective. And she provided opportunities for me to become an instructional leader. My first principalship was at Burning Harris Lyons Middle School. Dr. Holloway gave me, he was the superintendent of Clark County, an opportunity to be principal there. And I loved the middle school. I spent 13 years in middle school.
Wow.
And just to see the change, putting kids first. A lot of times as principals, we want to do what's right for adults, make sure they get the sweet spot or whatever they want to teach, but I've always focused in on this, and I learned this from Sheila Carr. She's always said, all kids, including our special ed kids, let's not lower the bar, let's have high expectations for all kids. And her big thing to me was, if you're gonna be an effective leader, you have to read. Good leaders read constantly and are always finding things or ways to get better, and don't settle. Don't settle for mediocrity. So I've enjoyed it, and then moved on to the high school.
That's awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you win an award as a high school principal at Clark Central?
I did in 2013. I won the Georgia Principal of the Year, and Philip and I was just talking about being the high school principal. I spent 8 years in that job. It's like every year's a dog year, 7 years for every year you spend in high school. But I can tell you that was the most rewarding time of my career. Going into Clark Central, I think we was needs improvement year 9 or something of that. We came off that list. Our APs increased, our SAT scores went up, but it wasn't because of me. It was because of empowering teachers and reminding them that we do not educate kids based upon their address, and having crucial conversations, but also doing it with love. Empowering them, empowering kids. I'll never forget my first year there. We had a pep rally. I was not pleased with it, so I cut out pep rallies for about a year. There were no pep rallies. But students came to me and they said, "Hey, can we have a pep rally?" I said, "Okay, tell me what it's going to be like." So they scheduled it out. When it's led by the students, you get a better product as opposed to the adults. And so I've always been a proponent of empowering our students as well.
That's fabulous. You know, I hear that from a lot of leaders that move on to the district office and role of superintendent. A large number of them say exactly what Robbie just said, that their favorite job of their time in education was that of a high school principal. And I certainly agree with that 100%. Philip, you're pretty fresh off coming out of that high school principal role. Have you rested up yet? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the high school principal job stretches you, and it stretches you as a leader, as a thinker. And one of the things that I wrestled with a lot as a high school principal is that students' independence and their independent thought, and your ability as the leader to manage and think and lead, and help them become adults and help them think through what their future looks like and what kind of adult that they want to be and that they need to be. And I graduation is always a special time, and we're in that season right now. And you watch the students walk across the stage and shake your hand, and oftentimes I'll just I'll be thinking and praying that student finds success in their life. But no, the high school principal job. So I was at Coney Middle for 2 years as the principal, and John Jackson, the superintendent. We've had some challenges at North, and walked in as the 8th principal, counting the interims, in 7 years. So the school had been open 7, and so I walked in as number 8, and just trying to figure out, because you're always as a leader trying to build teams. You're building teams with your faculty, you're building teams with your parents and your community. You're also building teams with students. And how do you create the environment and the culture that people want to be a part of? Right now, one of the challenges in education leadership is attracting people and recruiting them and retaining them that are high performing. I mean, there's so many individuals like you two who walked out the door in the last 4 or 5 years, and I just think about how do we replenish our leadership capacity as a state? How do we, each individual district has their own challenges, and then each school has their challenges as far as having the capacity in those buildings to be able to be successful and continue to push the bar. There's more challenges in public education right now than any other time during my life. There's so many different factors. And I think with the high school principal job, just reflecting on that, the challenges that came with social media, kids' access to that, teachers' access to that, communities' access to that, and how that changed things, because it's a 24/7 communication. It's a 24/7 media cycle. You're wrestling with all those things and trying to trying to put your school and put those students in the best situation to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great answers, great insight. At this time, we'd like to recognize one of our partners of GAEL, Syntegics. Many of our school districts have Syntegics, and that is becoming even more increasingly important with the new House Bill 268, the school safety bill. So we want to thank Daniel Dooley and all of the Syntegics employees. They are fantastic partners for GAEL. So now we're going to move into the point, you're very successful high school principals, and now you're at some point you're going to make the move to the district office. Some people would say you're moving to the dark side, right? So Robbie, why don't you talk to us about your move from high school principal to the superintendency, what that looked like, what caused that? When did you start thinking about that? There's a lot of young leaders out there that'll be watching and listening to this podcast that they're currently an assistant principal, or they're working at the district office or serving as a principal, and they got these questions in their minds. So talk to them a little bit about how you went through that process.
Well, as I sat in the principal's position, and at no point I was thinking about superintendency, but I thought about Atlanta City. They had a superintendent who was a special ed teacher, and very seldom do you hear of superintendents who have special ed background. They're usually coaches or worked in facilities, operations, something of that nature. And I can't think of his name right now. But that inspired me. But I had been at Clark Central 8 years. Someone had spoken to me about an opening in Henry as assistant superintendent for high schools, and I was like, no, I'm not sure. They came back. I got the job. The best experience in 3 years. I go from being principal of 1,500 students. You go to Henry County, 43,000 students. You go over 10 traditional high schools, 3 programs.
Wow.
And during that time period, we had a superintendent who was brought in a new, fresh superintendent, Mary Elizabeth Davis. Many of you know her. And just in that short period of time, I learned so much from her about organization, about how to deal with the boards. And we had some great conversations, but I learned from her, and the opportunity availed itself for me to become superintendent of Social Circle City Schools. So you go from 43,000 to 17 or 1,800 students. Huge switch. But the interesting thing is, when you're in a smaller system, you better know every aspect of the district office. So I was able to learn a lot. Interesting thing, this is my second superintendency in Clark County. I never brought anyone with me from the district. I always believe you need to develop the people that you have there in order to survive. So develop people there in Social Circle. We saw some gains. And then came to Clark County. But the superintendency, I had mentors just like you. John Jackson was one. The other one was Phil Lanew. And he challenged me as a high school principal at all times. But just going out there and looking at superintendents who've been very successful. Let's think about Alvin Wilbanks, who spent 53 years in the business. We call him the Godfather. Anytime you got an opportunity to be around him and just listen to his systems and processes. We went through SPDP, and we had an opportunity to spend a full day with this guy. And you got to think, he was up there in age as superintendent, but he moved like a young person, and he talked. He didn't have scripted notes or whatever. He just told you his systems and processes. And we were very impressed, and people walked away and said, I wish I had half of the skills that this man had.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's been great. And as a superintendent, you have to think from the balcony perspective. You can't get in the weeds. As a principal, you get in the weeds of things. But as superintendent, you have to look from the balcony perspective, empower your leaders, and move forward. You want them to grow. Your thing is that you want to be able to, when you leave or have others who are under you, are able to seek superintendency successfully. So I call them disciples of your legacy. Both of you are disciples of Jason Branch, who has done an excellent job, because it's my first year as superintendency. He served as my mentor, and I called him a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Me
And I
too.
learned a lot from it.
That's awesome. I think you make great points. You know, people are out there watching. You know, when you become a principal and or a superintendent, you don't get to bring in a team of people that you're bringing from your district that you're leaving if you're coming from the outside. So I think you bring up an excellent point about having to make sure that you're using the people that are there currently. I always told people, you know, they didn't choose me, but I chose them.
Mm-hmm.
I chose to be there, and I thought it was important that I learned that culture and learned to make sure that I learned how that system worked before I started making changes. So Philip, why don't you talk to us about how you know, Robbie had the opportunity to go from the high school principal position to the district office for a number of years, which I think is a huge advantage. You and I did not have that opportunity. So why don't you talk about going straight from the high school principal seat to the superintendent seat?
A couple of things that just stick out. The first is that we're all three mentioning names, and that we've all had mentors, and connectivity is so important in this business because each individual community and each individual school district has their own set of challenges, and they all have something to be really proud of. In the same vein, I think it's really important for educational leaders to be connected with other educational leaders because there are other people that are going through similar things, and so being able to talk about those things, being able to strategize together, and you know, I think as you change jobs, especially from the principal to the superintendent, it gets much more lonely, and you get, you know, you only have, you know, a handful of people that you can talk to, and then you've only got, you know, you've got to be connected from the superintendent level to other superintendents to be able to have those conversations. A few things that I think about is that a lot of educational leaders, I think, don't think about. The first is every day is a job interview, and you know, I think people think that the interview is the most important part of trying to get a job, and I would say that your reputation and it's a smaller world than people think it is, and people talk and they have conversations, and so what people say about you and how you treat people, even when you have to make a difficult decision and move on from an employee, but how do those people and how does that community respond to those type of decisions that you have to make, and what do they say about you as the leader? And sometimes they're not going to say nice things, and you got to be fine with that. You got to have thick skin on that, because if you know you're doing it for kids and you're doing the right thing for the school and the organization, then you make the right decision. So every day is a job interview. But I would tell you this also: Jackson County was not the first superintendent job I interviewed for, and that's something that you know, you're not going to get every job that you interview for, and it's important to understand how you respond when you don't get a job that you think you deserve or you think you've earned. And you know, you've got to understand that there's a reason why, and it might not be, you might not be the perfect fit for that, or in my case, I always thought that God had something more for me in store for me, and I needed to be prepared. And it's a lesson, it's a learning lesson also. And in each of these jobs, there's unfortunately there's politics that get played, and you have to understand the political arena. You have to understand the community, the fit with the school district, the fit with the board. The history of the school district, what's happened in those school districts, is all important questions to think through and understand. But for me, being at North Oconee for 11 years, and seeing the growth that we saw as a school in student population, the growth that we saw academically, athletically, and in the arts, I just said to myself, at what point do you look for the next challenge? And for me, Jackson County made perfect sense. Personally, it was close enough that my wife could continue in her career, because when you both have jobs in education or whatever field you're in, I think it's important from a family standpoint to understand that her career is just as important as mine. And people that have worked with her would probably say she's a lot more talented than I am, which is probably understandable. But also, just where can you go and make a difference? And I had a chance to follow April Howard as the superintendent in Jackson County, and I thought she did a tremendous job of planning and putting me in a position to be successful. And I think leaders, that's really important, is when you hand the baton to the next person. And Dr. Hooker has done that, and Mr. Wiggins has done that as well. When you hand that baton off, you want to know in your heart that place, that organization, that school, that district is in a better place than what you inherited.
Yeah.
And I think Dr. Howard did a tremendous job with that. And you know, we're currently on that I-85 corridor, so we're seeing tremendous growth, student population growth. I mean, we've grown, starting my 4th year, 662 additional kids per year on average. And so there are challenges that come with that growth, and there's also tremendous opportunities.
Wow.
And we've tried to refocus our staff, you know, because some of our staff have been in Jackson County for a long time, and they've seen the community change. And what we've tried to, from a leadership standpoint, instill in people is that every kid that walks through the door, whether they've been in our community, they lived in our community their entire life, or this is their first day in our community, and maybe the first day in our country, that we're going to love them, that we're going to respect them, and that we're going to treat them with integrity, and we're going to give them the best possible public school education that we can possibly give them. And so, you know, in my mindset, that was my thought in going into the superintendency. Reflecting back, I think in any leadership position, I think you better humble yourself enough to know that you can fail. And just surround yourself with amazing people who have the same heart and values that you have. But in the back of your mind, you're always contemplating, like, what happens if this is unsuccessful? And I don't think that changes from, you know, going into year 4 than it was going into year 1. Is that, you know, if you have that motivation in the back of your mind of, I refuse to let this fail for this community and for these kids, and you know, you listen. I think the active listening part of leadership can never be underestimated. And it's not just about listening; it's about actively listening. That doesn't mean you have to do exactly what the other person's telling you to do, but you better listen.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Robbie, Philip talked a little bit about fit. Why don't you talk about, you know, people out there that are thinking about applying for whether it's a principal job next door in a district or across the state or a superintendent job. Talk to them a little bit about how important it is for the fit of that leader with the school, the district, and the community. Expand on that a little bit.
Well, I think it's important if you're going to search out for a principalship or a superintendent, don't do it just for the title. Take time to research that school district, the community. It's interesting, when I first applied for my first superintendency, I'm like Philip here. I applied to other superintendent's job, and now I reflect back and say, thank you, God, I did get that job.
Amen.
But you have to think about that community. I always, when I applied for a job, drove through that community. Sat down and ate at a restaurant if possible to just get a feel of that community, but also research the board members, because you want to see what type of individual this is that you'll be working with. And the other thing is to remember is that when you go in there, will your skill set take this school system or this school to the next level? And active listening is a part of it, but I think the best part of being a leader, you've got to be confident, but yet humble. You can be confident and humble at the same time, but if you come in there gun blazing saying it's going to be my way or no way, I learned very quickly going from principalship to the district office. It's like going to Congress. You have to banter back and forth. You just can't have your way. You have to give in, concede to some things just to get what you need. But it's about having trust, a level of trust. What is it? Peter Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team. The bottom is trust, conflict, and accountability results. And I forgot the 5th one. But here's the thing. Trust is the main factor, and how do you learn to trust someone is by spending time with those individuals. I know as in my first year as superintendent, I'd spend a lot of time going to lunches with my board members, or having them over in my office, and just getting a feel for them as to if I brought something to the board, whether it's going to pass or not. If I knew I don't have the vote, don't bring it there. But as principal, what I learned very quickly when I got my job at Bernie Harrison at Clark Central, you find out who are those top performing teachers, you want to get them on your side. So having those conversations, and even with the students, I'll never forget when I went to Clark Central, I had this girl come up to me. I thought she was a faculty member. This was in July when I started. And she was coming in and had a whole proposal of what her organization was going to do. And I'm like, who's this person? It was a student leader and what she wanted to do. And with the teachers, just tell them, have a vision. You've got to have a vision, and you've got to be able to spread it. You've got to have an elevator speech no matter where you go, as to how, if you are given an opportunity to serve in this capacity, how you could make a difference. So, yes.
That's awesome. Well, thank both of you for joining us on this very first episode. And thank you for agreeing to join us on some future episodes that we'll be recording as well. But today was excellent. I just want to thank both Robbie and Philip for joining us today.
That's it.